Welcome back, Budget 2021, and we are getting the reactions from industry leaders across. I'm joined by two very eminent names, the Chairman and Managing Director of Kentaro, the legendary Dr. Maheshgupta. He's moving from one place to the other, is on a live video link. And I have with us Shobhna Kamineni, she's past president of CII, and of course the executive VC of Apollo. Thank you very much, Shobhna. I'll take the first question to Maheshji because I don't want him to lose his bandwidth connection as he's looking at me from his phone in the car. Maheshji, good afternoon. Are you happy with the budget? You think consumer spending will go up? You think people will have more money in their hands?
Yes, I think so, because the government was in a very precarious situation, and coming out of this precarious situation to have a deficit of about 6.8% and to invest from the government side would require a lot of consumers to come in, and the whole economy will rotate. And it's a very bold exercise by this government, considering that the fiscal norms don't allow more than 3%. They said 4.5%, and now going so high, and spending on health and infrastructure is something which will give a boost to the economy, to my viewpoint.
Okay, but Shobhna, taking that forward, Maheshji says that to be able to relax those very restrictive FRBM targets was a big call for the government, but I think it's a proper call, and I think it's necessary at this point of time, isn't it?
I completely agree with you, and so does every Indian, because I think that those were just barriers that the economists might have put for discipline in earlier years. But remember, we're coming from a year of deep survival, and the government really needed to take us into the revival mode. But I'm pleasantly surprised we're even building platforms like we've seen in healthcare, which will allow us to thrive. And that, to me, is just a masterstroke.
So I think what we need is a nimble, swift Indian economy that takes advantage of this situation, and there was no trepidation on the part of this administration to deal with laggard assets. So we're talking about getting rid of any laggard assets, powering growth, and I think what I really liked is the thrust on unequivocally, Vineet Agarwal is with me, he's president of ASSOCHAM. Viewers, all the top industry bodies here on Republic, CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, industry leaders. I'd like to ask you, Vineet, isn't it amazing that the government has given such a huge thrust on the private sector? Unprecedented level of freedom and responsibility which is given to the private sector. Vineet.
Absolutely. I think, we are seeing that the long-term consistency that the government has been showing in terms of what happened last year and what is continuing on this year is direct reflection on the stock market. It's just showing that there is a certain amount of consistency in taxation, in consistency in terms of thinking, promoting private enterprise, attracting global value chains to India. And ultimately all this will happen as and when we keep increasing and improving the ease of doing business. So a lot of emphasis on governance, improvement, process improvements, absolutely promoting private enterprise.
Absolutely. I think that is also the fact. And I think one more point, since I have Maheshji with me. Maheshji is someone, Shobhna, he has a ground level understanding of the economy. And I see that Vikram Sakhuja is joining me. Viewers, that's Vikram Sakhuja on your screen right now. He is the group CEO of the famous media company Madison. So he has a sense on the ground as well. Vikram, we have an interesting panel here because we have Maheshgupta of Kentaro, and he has his eye to the ground on consumer spending, and you being from the media sales fraternity understand what drives people to buy more. So before I come to you, Maheshji, what brings consumer sentiments up? The consumer is not listening to the exact details of allocations, etc. What drives him to spend more? And will that be achieved with this budget?
Yes, I think if we look at the middle income group and lower income group, they will get more opportunities now of earning money, because all the investment in the infrastructure will go to the people who would build the infrastructure. Even companies will benefit from this. And ultimately, it is the consumer who will drive the real benefit. And this may not happen tomorrow. It will take at least few months to come into the real action. But the news goes on today. We are all on internet and we all are on digital media. And everybody understands so very well. So I think before the money will come in the hands, people will understand what's happening in the budget. So to my mind, consumer will return, maybe a bit late. But the good thing is, government has not touched on the direct taxation. It has allowed the people to have the same taxation of 1.5 lakh rupees benefit in the affordable income housing group. And they have not touched anything senior citizens. They have given us a benefit. Okay, you don't have to put in your income tax return if you are to a certain level. So all these things are going to create a positive sentiments among the people. Maybe to some sections and maybe not to so other sections.
That's true.
So to my mind, it will be very helpful.
I think that's absolutely correct. You know, I particularly like one thing, Vikram. You know, since we in this economy, to pick it up, you need to promote competition. And there was one part which I thought was really historic, where they spoke about competition across sectors. I don't know if you noticed it, Vikram. They spoke about in the context of discoms and the gas sector and the electricity sector, that you can virtually choose which supplier you want to take your power connection from. And I think that's basically the government telling the private sector go and ensure that people get the best value for the service that you're trying to provide. But without trying to preempt your thoughts, Vikram, what do you think of this budget? Is the intent clear to you? What do you think the intent is?
I think it's an excellent budget. The need of the hour for growth was to put money in the hands of people and at the same time give enough signals for a sustainable growth. And I think the FM has done an amazing job of balancing this by actually bringing about investments in all about the core sectors. She's, I think, looked at each and every sector, the primary services, the manufacturing sector as well. So, and I think she's also looked across all pop strata. So I think it's been very, very balanced to that extent. She hasn't given too many sops, so that is good. It's not wasteful money that way. And people are now, but she hasn't increased any tax burdens. So one can actually look forward to the consumption cycle sort of now getting further energized. I just add that not unlike the Sensex, even the ADX, the advertising market, is to an extent driven by sentiment. And after a very bad summer of discontent, we were actually seeing some growth during the entire festive season. I think this budget is going to now give that and put it into overdrive. It's giving it a whole lot of impetus and stimulus.
That's very well said. You know, Shobna, people like Vikram, being the leaders in the advertising media space, are the first movers, or rather I would say they are the first moved when it comes to any slippage of sentiment or rise of sentiment. So he's reading it on the ground there very well. I'm going to come back to you, Vikram, on that. But I want to come back to Shobna on the issue of health. You know, the healthcare sector, I want your comments on it, Shobna. We've seen a big increase in allocation, right, to help the public health burden as well as the vaccination drive. I don't know, you remember the exact number the government put on the vaccination drive? I think it was around 34,000 crores. Do you think it's sufficient?
Yeah, 35,000.
And along with the Pradhan Mantri Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana, which has some 64,000 crores over 6 years, is this enough? Did you expect more?
No, in fact, the 64,000 is a pleasant surprise. The 35,000 crores, in fact, you know, the vaccine is out there. The government has been very clear in saying that people above 50 can get the vaccine free. First, of course, healthcare and frontline workers. And it's actually happening. Even as we stand today, there are probably a lakh of people who will get vaccinated every day. To me, I think we need to scale it up. And I do think that there are a lot of people now getting the vaccine free, like all of us who could have paid for it. So now this money is more than sufficient for what the government has done, and we're super thankful. I think it's kick-started, so we should actually be very grateful that they're not making any differentiation. What they're doing is to create survival for the revival, and that's important because once you start differentiating, that's where the problem comes. Is there enough money that has been invested, 10,000 crores a year? I think that would work. That's because that was never there before. They'll invest it because there's nothing there that they put for private sector. This is all government spending. So the more that you do, it's great. There's a lot of people that the government is insured, and now they'll actually create facilities for them. So hats off.
That's interesting, you know. Vineet Agarwal, who's president of ASSOCHAM, I think somewhere, Vineet, and people like you who've dealt with global businesses also will identify with it, and Vikram also will, because he's headed global media agencies in the United States of America. So I think the big story is of the India story. I think what's coming across from the government right now is a message of confidence in the India story, because there's such a sharp increase in capital expenditure. You know, it's an investment in the nation at the end of the day. So it's India investing in itself. It's like a share buyback, which the government is doing, you know. It indicates the faith that the fiscal deficit may be a short-term hit, but Indian industry, Indian corporates, Indian citizenry will ensure the growth. So I think it's for Indian citizens, industry to take the bait from here. What do you think, Vineet?
Yes, I think, you know, the economists talk about unleashing the animal spirits, and that is the thing that is needed to get the Indian investors really excited. And consistency in taxation is one of the definite ways that Indian investors will come. But let's not forget that, you know, we are also trying to encourage investments coming from outside. So asset monetization that the government has talked about.
Yes.
Ease of doing business the government has talked about. All the infrastructure investment that the government has talked about. I think these will also start attracting a lot of capital to the country, which we also need. So, I mean, simultaneously we need domestic capital as well as international capital, and that's true for any country, to really, any nation like ours, to really accelerate our growth.
Yeah, I completely agree. Viewers, by the way, Sensex has climbed to, it touched about 2,000, about 1,800, Nifty's inching closer to the 14K mark. Is this initial cheer or indicative of a happy, sustainable market for growth? We'll have to look at that. But look at the government's moves, Vikram. You know, decriminalization, the LLP Act to improve the ease of doing business. That's big because it has a positive sentiment for companies. And another thing, Vikram, the government has not imposed any major tax or burden to the middle class. You know, that's important. Also from the media sector, after all, you're a leader of the media industry. Maybe you want to talk about that. Many people ignore the needs of the media industry. What do you look upon it as? I mean, how will the media industry be affected by all this? Vikram.
No, well, I don't think there is any direct sort of reference to the media industry, but it's more indirect by way of the sentiment that the advertisers should now be able to sort of unleash. Now, some of the parts, if I have to look at media, I think the digital economy is right now on an upswing, and I think some parts of like for example, e-commerce, and now especially I think the mobile payments, that has got a 1,500 crore fillip. So that I think is putting further wind into the sails of a sector which is actually driving advertising, which is very good. There were two sectors which were sort of held back the last year, auto and telecom, and these are very, very big spend sectors. Now I'm hoping that with some of the kind of ease of doing business which has been actually talked about, we'll actually see a revival even these. Even if you have to real estate, which is a big spend sector, I think they're making a whole lot of ease, especially for the lower income housing. So I'm hoping that will also go up. So all in all, I think media is getting a fillip thanks to the kind of stimulus provided to the various businesses and the demand that you're creating amongst consumers.
Absolutely, it will. Spot on, Vikram, because when overall sentiment goes up, we'll be the beneficiaries of that. And I know, and you know, everyone in the media industry knows that people have been sort of waiting till They've been waiting for things to stabilize, and the budget has been a big inflection point. People have been waiting to see what the budget is like, and it's a great budget. Let me tell you, Sensex jumping, everybody jumping, people excited. There's suddenly a feeling that we can grab this as an opportunity moment for us. Subrakant Panda is Managing Director and CEO of Indian Metals and Ferroalloys, currently the Vice President of FICCI. Hi, Subrakant. You tweeted 2 days ago, once in a century pandemic calls for a budget 2021, which is different, especially when it comes to fiscal deficit norms. That was your tweet. What's your verdict today?
Oh, absolutely. I think, this budget is very comprehensive and well thought through. And, to acknowledge right off the bat that, the last year was an exceptional year, and therefore the fiscal deficit is going to be nowhere near what the FRBM Act mandates. But I think what is more important is that even though the economy has had a sharp recovery, I think now is the time to nurture it carefully and to provide fiscal support to both investment as well as consumption. And that's exactly what the finance minister has done with a well thought through gradual calibration of the fiscal deficit norms to come back to normalcy in 5 years. I think trying to do it any other way in an accelerated manner or anything of that sort would have left the economy in a fragile position going ahead. But what she has done in terms of laying out an agenda, I think, is brilliant. And of course, the outlays which have been provided across sectors, speaking from a manufacturing perspective, PLI had preceded the announcement, had preceded the budget, but all the outlays that have been provided. And also, I think the point I would like to add here is the quality of the expenditure, because the share of capex in the expenditure is going up, and that is obviously something which is productive and which will yield results going ahead.
No, that's absolute. Quality of expenditure, very important point. Quality of expenditure, you're talking about it. I think the intent is that we need to rise to the top of infrastructure. So we need to look very carefully at what they spoke about, a development financial institution to become a catalyst for infrastructure spending. And if you're looking at a lending portfolio of 5 lakh crores, now my question to Maheshgupta ji is, when the government says we want a lending portfolio for the DFI, development financial institution, of at least 5 lakh crores in 3 years' time, if this happens, if even 80% of this is achieved, Mr. Gupta, we are really building an incredible infrastructure capitalization ability. Can we do this? My concern always is, Mr. Gupta, government makes big announcements. Do they have, I lost the line there with him, but do they have the resources, the human capital to be able to achieve this, Mr. Gupta? Will they be able to achieve something like this? Because how much human capital exists? Or do you think professionals should be brought in by the Modi government so that in this tenure of the Modi government they can actually achieve it? Mr. Gupta, can you hear me? I don't think he can hear me, but let me take that to PK. Let me take that to Karan. Karan, both of you heard me on that. Yes. We like the agenda. My concern is human capital, resources, professional talent, bandwidth.